At Facebook ban, Pierre Poilievre asks, was that intentional? Jagmeet Singh says, vote NDP to avoid a Liberal supermajority. The advance polls at record numbers. All that and more on The Really Big Show. I'm Jim Csek with NowMedia. On the phone with me, Iain Burns at the nation's capital. Again, look, another beautiful day in the Okanagan here. Look at the traffic flowing smoothly in our live shot. The skies are blue. How are things looking out there in Ottawa?
It's finally a lovely day. It's very sunny, clear skies, and it's supposed to be 15 soonish. But I mean, the rest of the forecast is rain and clouds and gloom, so it's not going to last long.
We're going to get right into the election 2025 coverage because that's the story, right? That's the story until April 28th. You want to do the intro there? There you go. Advanced polls and record turnout. Pretty impressive, actually, right? Because I think about 29 million people are eligible to vote here in Canada, and almost 25% of them turned out to vote in the advance polls.
It's pretty huge, isn't it? I mean, the convenience is obvious, I think, isn't it? It's hard to resist the convenience, especially if you've got responsibilities, like you look after somebody, your children or whatever. So I'm not surprised that people have availed themselves of this, but it also suggests, doesn't it, that there's a kind of keenness that people are really want to get their vote out there. But like we've talked about this before, haven't we? It's hard to say whether this favors any particular party, because it seems like a lot of the Liberal voters are very highly motivated by both Mark Carney and this idea that they're going to stick their fingers up at Donald Trump. And then obviously the Tory voters are very motivated because they want change. They want a new government. So it's hard to read anything into it, I think.
Yeah, typically a larger turnout supports a change movement, but like you said, there's a lot going on there, and there's highly motivated. We're going to talk about a little bit later. Highly motivated groups for sure, and on both sides of that equation. So, but first of all, finally, we're getting some attention on this. Finally, Bill C-18 has become part of the election discussion, and this only from the Conservatives so far. It's actually in Pierre Poilievre's platform, and we're going to discuss that later today. Myself, Iain, and Renee are going to go through the platforms of both. But here's a clip from Pierre Poilievre on the Facebook ban.
Yes, look, a great question. It was about how after the lost Liberal decade, many media outlets cannot actually share their information on Facebook and Instagram. This has really attacked our local independent media, and maybe that's the goal with out-of-control inflation, rising housing costs, crime and chaos in our streets. Liberals are trying to get a fourth term by shutting out that information. Their entire campaign is based on making you forget what happened over the last 10 years of Liberal government and forget what will happen in the next 15 years if you read this report that was just leaked out that says that Canadians will be forced to forage on public lands for food if things continue on the current Liberal track. So it's not surprising that Liberals would want to shut out discussion on that. But a fourth Liberal term is not the answer. What we need is a new Conservative government to bring change so you can afford food and homes, change so there's safety in your streets, change so that we have freedom of expression. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
There you go. We finally get some attention on Bill C-18 and what it's done to local media, local independent media. Close to 100 outlets have failed. I'm going to say this over and over again. Close to 100 outlets have failed since the introduction of Bill C-18. We did that story the other day where Peter Menzies said, vote wisely, Canada. The fate of the free press depends on the outcome of this election. And he was the former CRTC vice president, and he's also a senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute. And he said, we're going to put this out there. When all is said and done, the future of a free, independent press and the public's trust in it is on the line next Monday. It will live or die depending on the outcome of this election.
Yeah, and he didn't say it explicitly, did he? But he kind of couldn't avoid the way that he constructed his article. He couldn't avoid kind of leaning into the Conservatives, I suppose. But that's because the Conservatives really are the only ones that are promising to try and get rid of the ban on news by Facebook, which Facebook argues was caused by the Liberal Party itself, because it tried to effectively, what one expert has called introduce a link tax, so that every time somebody clicked on a news link posted on Facebook, there would be a kind of tax on Facebook. So Facebook naturally said, all right, no news then. And that, as we've said many times, has been absolutely devastating for independent media, as Pierre Poilievre sort of alluded to there. We've been trying to speak to Pierre Poilievre on this subject for about 18 months, and he has not said yes. But he's obviously been asked at a press conference here, and he's blamed it all on the Liberals, which I guess he would do. But he was also asked after this. Somebody else asked, saying, kind of an inverse question, really. It was like, "What are you going to commit to continue giving money to the media in Canada, because we desperately need it to survive?" That was another question, and he said to that, yes, in the form of the local journalism initiative, which we could discuss that, but that's a much smaller sort of scheme where money is given to individual reporters who work for certain outlets. A lot of kind of First Nations stuff and green stuff at the moment. But anyway, so he mentioned that. But then he also said something that's very important. He said, we're going to ensure that we advertise with the local media when it's government advertising, which would be huge, obviously, because unfortunately now the federal government has chosen to give, so last we heard, over $1 million. By now it's probably a lot more than that, to Facebook, the company that they're in this sort of war with. So I think that would be quite a big deal if the federal government started to actually advertise with the local press. But Pierre Poilievre, just one last thing on that, he has put it in his platform. He said he didn't mention C18 in the bill that brought all this about with Facebook. He didn't actually mention that by name, but he said we will get news back on Facebook. So as it stands, he's the only one that's promised that.
And to be fair, locally, all the candidates at the Kelowna Chamber event there, including the Liberal candidate Stephen Fear, has said that Bill C-18 is a mistake and should be repealed, as did the NDP, as did Tracy Gray. But we've reached out to the Liberal government, I don't know how many times, Iain, to Pascal St-Onge, to Justin Trudeau, how many times to get no answer. And there is nothing in the Liberal platform that says they'll repeal it. What there was a promise from Mark Carney to actually increase censorship on the internet with the Online Harms Act.
Yeah, when they talk, whenever you ask a question about media to Mark Carney, his instinctive response is to say something about the CBC and what a valuable institution the CBC is, and how it needs more money and it needs more support. And then, as you mentioned there, he'll then say something about how we need to regulate the internet more strongly. We need to get in there, and we need to hunt down people that make hateful comments and all that kind of thing, which I'm very familiar with that from England, and I would advise anybody wondering what that might look like, just type in, I don't know, UK social media arrests or something like that. Type that into Google and have a look and see what that might resemble, what that might look like.
Well, I did an interview with Dan Elmas yesterday, the Conservative candidate. We did talk a little bit about Bill C-18 as well, so that interview will probably be up today. And also, somebody came in, a local realtor, and wanted to talk about the CBC funding and that, so that should be up today or tomorrow. So at least we're getting some attention on Bill C-18, because, again, media outlets across Canada, including the CBC and CTV, when I did that interview with the National, CBC The National, all outlets have lost half their traffic and half their revenue, but the Liberal government has selectively funded some and selectively did not fund others. So that has caused especially the independent local outlets, to really suffer in this. Because, I don't believe we should be getting funding, but we should also be allowed to utilize the audience that we earned servicing our community for the last 10 years. And also, Bill C-18 puts our community at risk during wildfires and other emergency crises. And God knows we've had a few crises.
And many more to come, I imagine. Seems to be the trend these days, doesn't it? But I mean, whether it's intentional or not, obviously Pierre Poilievre said it's intentional here. The Liberals would reject that, I assume. I mean, they basically have done in the past. They think that what they're doing is actually helping the media. But so that's the claim from both parties there. But the reality, the actual outcome, which is what we should focus on rather than what they say, the outcome of everything that's happened in the last couple of years with the media is that certain outlets are being propped up by the taxpayer, by Canadian taxes. They're being given money, they're being subsidized in various ways, and certain other media outlets aren't, while simultaneously all outlets have lost the ability to attract readers because of the Facebook and Instagram news ban.
I'll even summarize it.
Only came because of C-18. So the government did that. The result was a ban of Facebook and Instagram, a ban of news on Facebook and Instagram. And then the government has given money to certain outlets, and you have to pass a test. This committee decides, they kind of examine you and decide whether you deserve the money. And obviously, as you might not be surprised to hear, that committee is full of people who used to work for the CBC, have expressed negative opinions of conservatives and so on. It's pretty much a kind of liberal committee, as you might expect. And they decide, they choose. So then you in effect have a situation where some media outlets are allowed to survive in this really difficult time for media and others aren't. And it's a government that decides that. That is not good. That's not even good for like a tin pot dictatorship sort of country that we might hear about from the UN or something. It's certainly not good for Canada, which is supposed to be one of the best democracies and healthiest democracies in the world.
Yeah, I'll summarize that even more so. Like, all media has been crippled to the point where they're heavily reliant on the crumbs that are fed to them by the federal government. And then one media outlet is, looking to the winner in this is the CBC for sure. The winner in this with the Liberals is the CBC getting, like Pascal St. Onge want to double their funding. The loser in this is all media outlets, and in some more than others. But a lot of them are just the walking dead. If you look at Chorus's, their global stock chart, I mean, they're it's at 9 cents. They used to be a $19 stock, and they've got lots of debt. I mean, they've done tons of layoffs. Bell Media even laid off 4,800 employees. And in the news release said Bill C-18 was to blame, among other industry things. It's so clear, and what you and I have talked in the past too, the outcome is pretty easy to see, like what's going on. So then the question is, if it's that bad and nothing's been done about it, and then Poilievre is hinting at it, perhaps it was intended.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, this talk about CBC that we're hearing nonstop from the Liberal Party, I mean, I can't help but point out, as many other people have noticed and many other people point out, the CBC is generally favourable to Liberal ideas. Because the CBC, even though they deny it because they live in a fantasy land of their own creation, but the CBC is ultimately a liberal left media institution, or whatever you want to call it. That is ultimately their editorial line. That's what most of their staff believe in. Read their articles, you'll see it. It's not a secret. I mean, they deny it for some reason. I guess they just feel obligated. They feel like they have to deny it and pretend that they're neutral. But no serious person who's ever thought about this would say anything other than that the CBC is a liberal left platform. So that's all well and good. I mean, there should be liberal left platforms. Lots of people subscribe to that sort of ideology and that set of ideas. But the problem is that every single time a question comes up about the media, the Liberal Party says, oh, we're just going to give loads of money to this media organization that is generally favorable to our politics. That stinks. I mean, so obviously that stinks to high heaven. That is such an anti-democratic thing to do, and it's so ugly, and it's kind of hard to believe when you take a step back. It's hard to believe that we're actually living through this period where we have the governing party is trying to ensure that more money is given to media outlets that are favorable to that party. It shouldn't be this way, to put it concisely.
Yeah, and then there's been a lot of talk on the internet about this report that came out by the government itself, Future Lives, Social Mobility in Question. This is Holly Doan Blacklock saying the federal report is staggering. Joe Warmington from Post Media asked Pierre Poilievre about the report as well, and then said, "Why isn't every outlet doing this report?" Because it's it talks about how Canadians, it could get so bad by 2040 that they'll be out there foraging and going after all the wildlife. We tried to get a hold of the mooses and that, and they didn't really have much to comment, but I'm sure they're hiding by now. Um, but CBC insists the report on Canadians struggling in 24 is far more nuanced than the Tories suggest. So there you go.
So that's their report on it. I mean, look at the angle. The angle isn't, whoa, look at this. This is crazy. Like, this is what the Privy Council offers. They've commissioned this report and published it. And this report says that, in the words of the report, it is plausible that by 2040, Canada will basically be a different country, and it'll look more like a dysfunctional Latin American country or something like that, rather than what we know as Canada now, just to summarize it. I mean, that should be the story, you might think. Instead, however, the CBC's story is, in effect, look at the Tories exaggerating and misleading, trying to mislead the public about this report, which is nowhere near as they say, it's actually far more nuanced. It's not as crazy as Pierre Poilievre makes it seem. And then they go on to say, the report also concludes that the loss of belief in social mobility could make space for positive ideas. And that's because if you actually read the report, it says that some people might become so jaded and so disillusioned with Canada and with life in Canada that rather than try to go to university, rather than try to get a house, rather than try to kind of like climb the ladder and improve their lives, what they'll do instead is they'll create like community gardens and basically live like sort of hippies and like, or almost live like, they'll regress to an almost like semi pre-industrial lifestyle. And then the CBC says, that's a positive, isn't it? That's not so bad. It's just completely, this is just a shameful article. And it's written by what's her name? Catherine Tunney. Catherine Tunney, I think her name is. She's like one of their big dogs. She's like one of their main reporters. And this is just absolute trash. I can't believe that she put her name to this. Frankly, I'm kind of embarrassed for her as a fellow journalist.
Obviously, they're trying to downplay it because it is pretty much a bombshell report put out by the government, no less. Put out by the government. That's what people have to realize. It's actually put out by the government, and here's the CBC doing the work for the Liberals, trying to downplay it and make it seem like, well, it's not so bad. It can't be that bad.
But the other thing that's in there, which is really funny, is like, it's not necessarily a judgment on the current policies or anything like that. It's not a judgment on the Liberal government. It's just what could happen in 15 years. Well, do you think what could happen in 15 years will just come out of absolutely nowhere? Is that it? There's no history. Today is year zero, is it? And we're just starting fresh. Whatever happens in the next 15 years will have no relationship to the last 10 years or the last 200 years or whatever. It's just complete nonsense. And I have the feeling that she's been put up to this because I've seen articles like this written in my time as a journalist where you're kind of told what the conclusion is by an editor. It's like, yeah, the Tories have been really rabbiting on about this. Why don't you write a story saying that it's a load of bollocks and they're hyping it? And then she's gone, okay, well, I'll try. And then she's ended up spitting out this pile of garbage.
Like I said, we reached out to the wildlife, and the wildlife said, "What, are you kidding me? Can you not fix this?" It's so bad. It's so bad. And it's just a wonder why it's not being picked up by every outlet out there. This is like it's a bombshell report on Canada.
But if it was something, look, if it was something that they were interested in, right? if this report had come out and it said by 2040, LGBT Canadians and First Nations Canadians and non-white Canadians, whatever it is, whatever it is that they usually push on that side of the argument, if it was anything like that, saying that they were going to suffer terribly by 2040, that there was going to be awful racism, that there was going to be, it would be impossible to be openly gay or something like that, obviously the CBC would be screaming about that. Or if it came out and said by 2040 it won't be possible to get an abortion or something like that because of these fanatical right wingers and all the rest of it, then the CBC, CTV, all the rest of them, they would jump on that and they would say like, we're heading towards this fascist hell, and we have to do everything that we can to avoid it so that the Conservatives don't win. It's just like, obviously they're going to do that because that is their personal politics. And this is why you need a diversity of media. Instead of just having everybody from the same social background with the same political views in the media class, because it ends up like this. It ends up a really sort of boring, uniform media landscape where you don't really learn anything.
Yeah, well, the CBC talked about, I think Cochrane was talking about the conservative budget, and the first thing he said was, well, they're going to cut, and the first cut they're going to do is they're going to cut the CBC. So make sure he had his audience all riled up there. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, we've had this discussion before. The fact that they haven't sort of come out and done something equivalent to like, recusing themselves or something, and just saying we just can't discuss this because it concerns us, and it's obvious that we're like implicated in this, and we can't possibly hope to be neutral. Like, we've been compromised, so to maintain our integrity and our neutrality, we're not even going to go there. Like, that they should have done something like that. But yeah, the fact that rather than not do that, they've actually consistently brought it up, as you sort of alluded to there. I mean, again, shameful behavior.
A little bit of campaigning there. So Jagmeet Singh, not getting a lot of headlines, but now he's coming out and saying he warns of a liberal supermajority. This is the Holly Dome Blacklock story. He said yesterday in BC to hold the line on election day to prevent a liberal majority. What he wants is just another where he can be the guy that holds the like the balance of power. I mean, he's had it really good.
He said that explicitly, and so has Blanchette from the Bloc. He's also said that. He said, like, vote for us and we might have the balance of power, because they know how great it is. Like, if you get a minority government that relies on one of these lesser parties for support, you can just, you can get your shopping list out, can't you, and make demands.
Jagmeet's office was, targeted for a lot of signs, and I didn't put it in here because it was a lot of negativity. You can guess what the negativity was. There was a lot of stuff like sellout and stuff like that was listed in there. But I am going to be interviewing the Liberal candidate here, the local Liberal candidate, tomorrow at 2 p.m. So we shall see what he has to say, because it seems like this party has almost given up. We actually have Tom Mulcair here talking about the party, because he was the former leader of the NDP. I'm going to run that clip here.
Won his majority. He had 39% of the vote, which is exactly where Poilievre is now. The problem for him, of course, is that the Liberals have been eating the NDP vote. And
the story of the NDP, Benzie, in this is, like, it's hard to overstate its significance, right? Because as you were pointing out prior to the break, Harper won a majority with 39% of the vote. Poilievre has expanded the Conservative base, right? To hit from, the percentages that Andrew Scheer and Erin O'Toole got. It's just that the NDP, I think in 2011, and someone can correct, I think they were at 30%. Yeah. And now they're at 10. And all of that support has migrated to the Liberals, which has produced such a different outcome if, in fact, the polls are borne out on.
There you go.
That's the story. I think this is going to be the story, isn't it? It's going to be the story of this election. I mean, there are going to be many stories, but I feel like for the nerds anyway, who tried to understand how the Liberals have won, which I maintain is probably going to happen, they're going to say it was the NDP. It was the collapse in NDP support. And you're going to speak to Mario Canseco, I think, is it today that you're going to speak to him?
Today, yeah. I think at noon or something like that.
Yeah, and I reckon, if I know my Mario, I reckon he will he'll say something similar to that. That the NDP's vote, they've just abandoned, like about 50% of their voter base has abandoned the party, and they want Mark Carney instead.
The home tax could be worth billions. That home tax cut could be worth billions. Again, this is from Blacklocks as well. Repealing the GST could cost the federal treasury anywhere from $400 million to $2 billion annually. And that is the difference between the two parties. And that's what you and I have been talking about. The liberal tax cut really only benefits a few, like a small portion of people, because it's only for first-time home buyers, whereas the conservative one is tax-free sales of all new homes up to $1.3 million, which makes that tax cut worth a lot more. And then, Poilievre goes through it and explains that this tax cut, it used to be, there wasn't supposed to be GST on the lower end homes in the first place, because when it first came out, when they added GST to the homes, there was supposed to be no GST on homes under $450,000, but you can't get a home for that now anymore. So everybody's basically paying GST on their homes. And that was supposed to go up, be indexed with inflation in that, but that hasn't happened.
That is really, isn't it, the story of almost every tax, especially the ones that people dislike the most. Almost always they started either as like temporary measures. That's the classic. That's the income tax story, isn't it?
Yeah,
or
GST as well. GST as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Or they start really, really small. And the politicians that introduce it are like, come on, like, what are you talking about? We got bigger things to worry about. This is like a tiny little tax. This is like $15 a year or something. Fast forward 50 years and it's like 30% of your income or something like that. It's just always the same, isn't it? This is the thing with bureaucrats and the political class. They're very, very sneaky little devils, aren't they? And they'll get what they want out of you eventually.
Yeah, so Parliament from 1991 started charging the sales tax on home priced over from $450,000, then a benchmark that impacted only luxury property back then, right? The threshold at the time benefited 95% of home buyers, but they never fixed it indexed it to the cost of living. So there you go. And then Poilievre is saying he's really indexing to the cost of the living.
And this is how something like an inheritance tax or even a home equity tax or whatever, we've discussed a lot of these controversial ones. This is how they would happen ultimately, isn't it? They would come in and it would be a home equity tax on people who have a home worth, let's say, $2 million or more. And then all the usual suspects will be like, oh, great. Yeah. Like down with the man. And then fast forward 10 years, 15 years or something. And either, as you pointed out, it wouldn't be attached to inflation, so it would start to suck in more and more people, or they would just bring the threshold down. And with inheritance tax, again, they might do something like, okay, if you're going to die and you want to give your kids $10 million or $50 million or something, then we're going to put in a very modest, humble little 5% tax on that. Okay, my lord, please accept. And then again, fast forward 10 years, and it'll be down to like $1 million and then $500,000. And, it's the ratchet effect, isn't it? I think that's kind of why you have to be very, very suspicious of new taxes in general, frankly.
So the Liberals put out their platform and getting a lot of pushback from economists. And then Carney was asked about it because one of the more, I guess, experts in economy, Trevor Toome, said that it's a bad plan. And here's Carney responding to this.
Yes. I have more experience than he does, and it's important to state that.
With CBC. I'd like to follow up on that. Just if you've got an economist like Trevor Toome saying that your plan is unsustainable, is just that, is there an argument that if Pierre Poilievre is trying to bring down spending, bring down the deficit, that his plan is more fiscally responsible than yours?
Okay. There's one thing that you can write on a paper. There's another thing that will happen in the economy. Okay? So our plan, to be clear, is focused on investment and growing this economy. All of the spending, all of the investment in years 3 and 4 are for growing the economy.
So yeah, there's quite a few economists actually coming out and saying that the Liberal plan doesn't make a lot of sense and will actually hurt Canada going forward. including in this one here, Mark Levesque here. He's a former chief economist at the Public Sector Pension Investment Board and chief economic strategist at TD Securities. And he says he's nonpartisan. But Carney has been basically on the back of his heels there, trying to defend this platform and not getting a lot of love from economists and the banks.
Well, this guy who's now criticizing Carney in this tweet, they actually quoted him in because he sent out like 10 quotes or something like that from economists who've praised or said something favorable about the Liberal platform. And he was one of them. So it's kind of funny that he's then like the next day or later in the same day, he's come out and said no, basically, and sort of rebuked Mark Carney. But it's that arrogance, isn't it? It's almost like that professorial arrogance. But then it's arrogance that's supported ultimately by, credentials, isn't it? It's kind of like, I went to Harvard. I mean, he might as well have said that. But he's saying, I've got more experience than him. I mean, again, we had this conversation yesterday, didn't we? Like, Neville Chamberlain had more experience than his rivals in the Conservative Party in the 1930s in England. That's why he became Prime Minister. Not very good Prime Minister, was he? Anthony Eden, and I'm going to keep it to Britain. Anthony Eden in the 1950s became Prime Minister. He was probably the best qualified Prime Minister ever to start the job, and also probably the worst Prime Minister that Britain has ever had. Just because you have experience, just because you have credentials, doesn't mean you're going to do a good job. I mean, I can't believe I have to even say that. But Mark Carney's, to use his favorite word, the premise of Mark Carney's answer there seems to be that experience, like the longer your experience, the more you know, the more valuable you are. That's not necessarily the case at all, as history would tell, anybody, even the person who's only slightly curious about history would learn that very, very rapidly. So I don't know what kind of a trick he's trying to pull here. But also, another thing, I mean, I think he's quite right when he says the Tories have been a bit cheeky, when he says that, like, it's on paper, because the Tory platform is full of, nonsense, really, in that regard, where it says the economy is going to grow this much, and then that's how we're going to balance the budget, or whatever it is. Not actually balance the budget, but that's how we're going to bring in, like, extra revenues. That's fantastical thinking, obviously. That's nonsense. You can't pretend that you can just bank that growth that hasn't even happened yet. But similarly, Mark Carney's saying that he's going to turn Canada into a green energy superpower, and we're going to bring all this money in from green energy and all that, like hydrogen and all that sort of thing. That's also nonsense. That's also a castle built on sand, because that technology has not proved to be particularly profitable or successful.
I would say that the other one is based on something that Canada has a lot of and sells a lot of, and the Carney plan, it's talking about something that we don't really have and have not sold a lot of.
But it is also his fundamental point that he made, Carney, there, I think, is accurate. That he's saying the Conservatives have, like, baked in a lot of this money that they're apparently going to earn that is not guaranteed. It's not like we've seen already, as Donald Trump trashes the global economy. We've seen oil tank, the price of oil. I mean, that happens, obviously. That happens from time to time. And we don't know if globalization really is going to end. We could end up with all these minerals and pipelines and everything, trying to sell it, and people just saying, well, the market doesn't exist anymore, kind of thing. So then what are we going to do? I mean, it's a valid critique, but I just think he hasn't turned that logic onto his own plan, because his own plan is based on a lot of fantastical thinking about particularly green technology, which is entirely unproven.
Yeah, let's look at the voters by age group. And we've said this over and over again. You can kind of see it in the lineups and the crowds at the different ones. So in the 18 to 34-year-old, according to the polls, definitely a conservative leaning. Again, to the 35 and 54-year-olds, definitely a conservative leaning. But then the strength, and we've seen this over and over again for the Liberals, is the gray hairs, the 55 plus. And these are the people that are typically the ones watching CBC as well, though, because these other two demographics, not a lot of those people are watching TV anymore or CBC.
I think like the most interesting thing there for me is in the first one, 18 to 34. What's interesting to me is that 38% of that group want to vote for the Liberal Party. That's a shock to me, because usually they're either NDP or Change, whoever that Change Party is. The Change Party this year is the Conservative Party. I mean, obviously a plurality of them do back the Conservatives, but I'm just very surprised that they're going in for the status quo party, because usually that younger demographic will do almost anything other than choose the status quo. But again, I think it's the Trump factor and the Carney factor, isn't it? Again, it's even getting into the minds of the young people, apparently.
And then there's a National Post article that kind of summarized the budget, the two platforms there, showing that the Carney platform there is $30 billion in saving some government productivity cuts, I guess their version of Doge. And in the Poilievre one, there's $23 billion in cuts from consultants. $25 billion we spent on consultants last year, and cutting the CBC in there. $25 billion we cut on consultants. That should be an easy cut. Just walk in there and say no. Hey, I mean, I believe that cut pretty easy. I mean, I'm sure that Poilievre will look at the efficiency as well, way before the Liberals will look at efficiency and cutting anything, because the Liberals not very good at cutting government. They actually bloated government from 2015 to today. I think the government has grown from 192 to 274 or something like that.
It's an enormous amount, and Chrystia Freeland took most of the blame for that. But Mark Carney was obviously an advisor for about half of the Trudeau, government, and he is very much in favour of the state spending money to stimulate the economy. That's basically his political philosophy, isn't it? So I think he's obviously in favour of using the state.
That has been Carney's position when he was at the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, and now running, is the government coffers are definitely, and it leans heavily into funding corporations to drive this modular home building, clean energy stuff.
Sorry, just what you mentioned there about Bank of England, it's reminded me of something else that Carney said. I believe it was yesterday, where he said, in his words, he said, "I've run economies before, and I've managed budgets before." What is he talking about there? I can't believe he said those words, and it's just not been scrutinized at all. Even I noticed it, and even I'd forgotten that he'd said it. But what is he talking about? I've run economies. A central banker doesn't run an economy.
But he could say, well, I was running the Canadian economy for the last 4 years, because he was the economic advisor.
Well, he's trying to shy away from that, isn't he? He's trying to pretend that it was nothing. It was no big deal.
Because that's the only economy he's run. You're correct there. Bank of Canada governor, Bank of England governor doesn't run the economy. But economic advisor, especially someone that has significant influence over Trudeau and Freeland, was actually running our economy. But doesn't want to take any credit for that, or blame, or whatever you want to do. Actually, none of the Liberals want to take any responsibility for the last 10 years. It's like it never happened.
But they're really trying to obscure that fact, and the defense that they're trying to run for Carney is that he was an advisor, so he provided advice, but that doesn't mean that the Prime Minister is obligated to take that advice, and we don't know the extent to which the extent to which Trudeau said no to his ideas. But it's kind of like, that's a problem. That's not something to brag about. That's not a defense of Mark Carney. It's a problem that we don't know the nature of his 5 years spent as an advisor to Justin Trudeau. That's a black mark against Carney's on Carney's resume. Why don't we know what actually happened there? What was the arrangement?
Well, I mean, he must have influence. I mean, Justin Trudeau, in his own words, says he doesn't worry about the economy. And then Chrystia Freeland, definitely really close connections to Mark Carney, in that he's the godfather of her child as well. So,
and obviously Trudeau, relentlessly complimentary of Mark Carney, wasn't he? All the time, very deferent and full of praise for Mark Carney. So obviously he respected him a lot, or
Yeah,
does
yeah.
respect him still.
Yet, if we had a media that was actually calling out that record, I mean, we don't hear much from our national public broadcaster about the record of the last 10 years, like just talking about how bad it is, and then that report of how bad it can get. Very little talk about that. All they want to talk about is Donald Trump.
Yeah, I mean, even a lot of people, I've spoken to a lot of people. Obviously, I'm, from England. That is my abandoned homeland. A lot of people speak to me who are Liberal voters, and they say, "Oh yeah, like he was Bank of England governor, wasn't he? And he did a really good job there." I'm kind of like, no, he didn't. Now, people have no idea what kind of a job he did at the Bank of England, and he didn't necessarily do a bad job. Though, I mean, there are definitely arguments that he did do a bad job. But in general, the assessment of his time at the Bank of England is that it was kind of neither here nor there. It's kind of a few good things, quite a few bad things as well. Not a success, anyway. Really not a success. And in no way did he justify his like superstar billing. Because when they brought Mark Carney in, the British government, they were sort of saying to the British people, like, we've got the best here. You should get ready for some central banking, folks. And he was a dud, he didn't really do anything. So I just find that strange, but they've banked that in their minds. A lot of people who are positively disposed towards Carney, they've banked that in their minds that, oh, he must have done good at the Bank of England. But nobody speaks about it, There's no discussion about it at all in the press or anywhere.
Well, we've got a clip here from CBC talking about Poilievre's platform, so let's run this clip.
Happy Tuesday, last Tuesday of the election. It's good to see you all. Kayla, I'd like to start with you. The deficit numbers in the Conservative plan are much lower than the deficit numbers in the Liberal plan, but there's a difference in how they do this, in that the Liberals booked no revenue from economic investments they're making. The Conservatives book revenue from economic investments that they're making. You heard the criticism there from Mark Carney. What's your sense of where things stand now that the platforms are out?
Yeah, well, there are certainly a lot of contrasts to be seen on that deficit number. 70% reduction for the Conservatives compared to Carney and the Liberals' platform. I'd also point out, I heard the bloc leader talking there about cuts. It's $14 billion per year. Over 5 years, that'll be about $70 billion. When you consider that the operating budget of the Government of Canada is about $558 billion, $14 billion is far from draconian. So this is not massive cuts. I think it's pragmatic and realistic in order to find some efficiencies within the government. In terms of looking at future revenues, to me, this is betting big on Canada's resource economy. The absence of that from the from the Carney platform, perhaps authored by the Trudeau team, but from the Carney platform, I think speaks to where they may sit on resource development and how much they plan or don't plan to actually move those natural resources. So, independent economists have said that this is actually reachable and might even present an underestimate of what is possible in terms of the potential of extrapolating resources. So I think it's fair to consider that in calculations and assign that you can grow and reduce spending at the same time.
Yeah, Philip Cross, former chief economist.
There you go. We're going to break it down.
Interesting. Yeah.
We're going to go through you, me, and Renee. We're going to talk about the two platforms for sure.
That sounds like a movie title, doesn't it? You, me, and Renee.
You, me, and Renee. The BBC, your favorite public broadcaster from the jolly old England there, says, we're not Americans, but what does it mean to be Canadians? Canada a communist state or a stolen land? BBC asks citizens about the U.S.-Canada relations.
It's funny. The BBC, it doesn't really do much Canada coverage at all, frankly. But when they do, it tends to amuse me, at least, because they do a lot of these street interviews, and it's so funny because they say it starts out like, what does it mean to be Canadian? That's the first question, and then it's like loads of boring answers. Or it's like, we're not American, and we're kind. And then this guy in Alberta just said, it's a communist state. Which I just thought. And then at the end as well, somebody in BC, had to be BC, was asked about Canada-US relations, and she just said, well, what difference does it make? It's all stolen land. So I think they really got some funny little interviews there.
And then again, from England, obviously you put these together. Sounds like Bill Gates is working for the English now. Scientists considering brightening clouds to reflect the sunshine away to prevent runaway climate change. You know, that's going to work out.
Yeah, I mean, this is, as you can imagine, this has gone down like a lead balloon with the British commentariat or whatever you want to call them, because Britain it's probably one of the worst things, other than the politics of that country and the general like incompetence of the government. One of the worst things about England is that it's always cloudy. It really, really depresses people to the point that if the sun comes out for like an hour, they'll do almost everything that they can just to get outside. It's like a natural urge because they need the vitamin D or something. It's really horrible, gloomy land, I'm sorry to say. And then for some reason, this same country is now talking about trying to figure out how to dim the sun by putting aerosols into the atmosphere or making it so that the clouds reflect the sunshine.
Well,
and this is all obviously to save the planet or some such malarkey, but I just find it, again, very amusing.
There's always a winner. The British government set aside £50 million for project designed to dim the sun as a way to adapt to global warming. Bill Gates was talking about something too, about putting stuff into the atmosphere to block the sun rays as well. Bill Gates should focus on making some software better than Windows.
Social media platform better than LinkedIn, maybe.
The Windows software still to this day. I can remember like a long time ago when I was actually certified in NT when it first came out, going to a conference and the NT guys claiming victory of a server staying up for a week. And then the guys from like Linux or Unix said, well, what are you talking about, man? Our servers are up for like a year. and you're lucky to get a week out of it. I mean, I'm no fan of it. So there you go.
No, I mean, I remember, what was it, Windows 7 when that came out? It was just like an abomination, wasn't it? That's the last time I ever used Microsoft, I think. It was 7. It was all right back in like XP. That was sort of all right, wasn't it? And 98, I think, was kind of good.
One thing you can be sure about a Windows computer, it's best when you first open it. Because every day after that, it just gets worse and worse and worse. It degrades over time, and it attracts viruses just like people get colds these days. It just seems like you're always like infected with something. And not a fan of the Windows, not a fan of that paperclip. I can't remember what that paperclip guy was called, but he was annoying that would pop up from the corner there.
Yeah, he was. I had some words with him over my life. I'm sure not very nice words.
I haven't used a Windows computer for a long time though, so sometimes I have to go on and help somebody with a Windows computer, and I don't even know like where the start button is. I don't know. Not very. How's that? Not very intuitive anymore. We talked about this. We put in our friend from the down under there talking about the Canadian border here, Caroline Levitt. We're going to play this clip.
At the border, President Trump continues to deliver on his promise to make America safe again. The Wall Street Journal captured the Trump effect in a recent article. Border crossings grind to a halt as Trump's tough policies take hold. U.S. Customs and Border Protection recorded its lowest southwest border crossings in history in March, and we're seeing the same successes at our northern border. Here's how the New York Post put it. Northern border sector previously overrun by illegal migrants sees dramatic drop in crossings. We haven't seen anyone since November, end quote. According to U.S. Customs and Border Protection, just 54 illegal aliens were apprehended in the Swanton sector of our northern border, which stretches more than 300 miles in March. This is a drastic 95% drop from the more than 1,000 border crossings that were caught in March 2024. This is a main hotspot area that recorded more than 80% of all apprehensions along the northern border during the 2024 fiscal year. And new reporting from the Washington Times fully...
There you go.
Oh, well, emergency over then, Donald. You can drop the tariffs now, mate.
I did listen to an interview with Senator Kennedy there, and he was basically laying into Trump and saying the tariffs got to go. Even Elon Musk in his earnings call yesterday said that he doesn't believe in tariffs, said the tariffs have to go. Senator Kennedy said that we should not be punishing our best friend, Canada, that there should be a zero tariff for. So there is a growing movement, even in the Republican Party, that Canada needs not to be punished, and it's that doesn't get reported though, because right now, every one of Carney's speeches is how he amps up the terror threat from Donald Trump.
America wants to break us so they can own us. I don't know how many times he said that now. That's kind of like, that's his opener. Like he's a comedian on a tour or something.
And he's more subdued than Chrystia Freeland, who says there'll be tanks in the streets and we need to get nuclear weapons and other.
Yeah, I think a lot of the hysteria, a lot of the shock and the hysteria from the first couple of months has started to subside now, hasn't it? And I think that's happened because people have realized that Donald Trump isn't like an evil genius, Dr. Evil there with a master plan to destroy Canada or whatever. I think people have started to realize that he's actually not really very competent, and I don't think he really knows what he's doing. And that's comforting in a way, because it means that he's not going to achieve any of the nonsense that his servants have said that he's going to achieve.
I think he drinks too much Coca-Cola. He's like jacked up on sugar all day long, and he's got ADHD, and he just like throws stuff out there. And maybe that's a good summary of him. He's like jacked up on sugar, and he just is just spitting stuff. And I think like the falling out. I shouldn't say falling out, but Elon Musk pulling back and Elon Musk sharing his thoughts on tariffs is definitely a pulling apart of some of that. That anger, I think, it'll help. We'll talk about it later. We got it here and later. Canada's migrant worker programs, a business model to suppress wages. That's according to the BC Union. That says as the race between the Liberals and the Conservatives heat up toward election day, the Union of BC Ironworkers is calling on both parties to commit to major changes to Canada's migrant worker program. And it says it's a business model to suppress wages.
They sort of, if you read on, they kind of try and they're making what might seem superficially to be a right-wing argument against. Oh, that used to be a left-wing argument against immigration, but is now more of a right-wing argument. And then you read on, but then, as usual, this is what you often find with the left or left-wing, left-aligned people. He says, "It makes me sick the level of abuse that some of these foreign workers have to be have been so subject to. It's not right." It's kind of like, all right, mate. They're trying to complain about the macroeconomic effects of immigration, and then to justify that, they're talking about individual migrants who they say are mistreated. I mean, it's a desperate attempt to, because they're just trying to seek permission, basically, aren't they, to talk about immigration in a bad way. You're not really meant to do that on the left, are you, in general? But whatever. I mean, it's clear as day, though, isn't it? And the fact that so many unions are still attached to the NDP and are still kind of left aligned in political terms is hard to understand, isn't it? Because it's the left that has been open doors immigration in general around the Western world over the last 30 years. And obviously open doors immigration policies bring wages down, as Justin Trudeau said a couple of years ago.
Let's move on to markets. Stock market up again today. As 950 points when I clip this. It's actually only up about 460 points. Again, I think some of this trade stuff, tariff stuff is going to start calming down. I think there's going to be some deals that are going to be made. One of the things that Senator Kennedy said is that Trump has won. He's basically won. He's had all these countries reach out. They all want to make a deal. So Trump should take that as a win and start making the deals and start getting back to business so that everybody can kind of calm down and start having a trade war. But, he did say that Trump has won this trade thing. He's got everybody coming to the table. And there you go.
We'll see.
We shall see, shall we not? There you go. Gold. You and I talked about this. Gold has, when we said it touched 3,500, that's that physical wall that it hits. And just like somehow, like these stock markets, gold, Bitcoin, all that seems like these nice round numbers. Ran too far, too fast. And you can see that in the chart itself. Look at that spike. So it's coming back off there, coming back a little hard actually. So it's off. I think right now it's off about $79 on the day. Again, down to 33.02 after touching 3,500. So it's healthy for stuff that it's moving up to kind of start building a base here, because Nothing ever goes straight up. When you get these parabolic lifts like that we see on the far right of that chart, you typically get a pullback. And we talked about that day that it kind of shot up. And even the days prior to that it looks like it's overheated and about to pull back. And there you go. And then if we look at our friend in the Bitcoin world, we said that it was basing in that $80,000 range and that it was likely to take another run at 100. And there she goes. And there she goes.
It's because markets ultimately are just people, and people are irrational, weird, flawed, often stupid, emotional creatures. That's why they like, okay, we're going to do 100, we're going to do 100, and then they get scared, and it's like, oh no, it's too high.
Yeah,
it's just it's a rational exuberance, isn't it? As I think Warren Buffett said, or somebody like that.
So right as of this moment, Bitcoin is 93,717. So yeah, so it technically, like technical analysis is one thing, fundamental analysis is the other, right? So do your technicals, and you can see like the charts. Some of the charts are easy to read when you look at technical analysis, right? But that also has to be followed with fundamental analysis. And then if you look at Bitcoin, the wind is in its sails. There's no doubt about it. Even in Canada, Pierre Poilievre is friendly to Bitcoin. If you look at his disclosure, he has disclosed, Blanchette has disclosed, Jagmeet has disclosed, Mark Carney has not. In Poilievre's disclosure, he owns some Bitcoin. Not a lot, I think $10,000 worth of Bitcoin. But he's also spoke of Bitcoin in the past. There's a Vancouver mayor here that says he wants to make Vancouver the Bitcoin capital of the world. Trump's administration has said that they want to make the United States the Bitcoin capital of the world. The SEC recognizes it now. So it is, like I said, the wind is in the sails. Technically, there's some trades there. And like I said, like when it filled that gap, when it shot up, that's if you look to the middle of the chart there in November, that's the election, right? Shot up from the election and then ran up high, and then obviously it's going to come back and backfill that, and it has backfilled that gap there. So now it looks like it wants to challenge those old highs. And then once it challenges those old highs, it'll bounce around in that high, and if it breaks through that high, it likely will run up quite a bit higher. But then that doesn't mean it's over or it's going to continue to run. That's just the way it is. Anybody, any comments on the Bitcoin? The Bitcoin gods, there you go. And then Canadian dollar. Again, this is not a story of the Canadian dollar in strength. This is a story of the US dollar in weakness. So again, the Trump tariff talks definitely weakening the US currency in the world, especially with China. China has a lot of clout there because they own a lot of US T-bills. A lot. Over $1 trillion of US T-bills. And when they were playing with the Japanese like that too, the Japanese said, well, we're going to sell these T-bills. And all of a sudden, let's do a deal. And then, so the Japan holds a lot of US debt, as does China.
Well, whatever the cause, it's a bit of a relief, isn't it?
Yeah.
For the loonie, because it was looking extraordinarily depressed not so long ago.
Some people in the industry would even argue that this is bad for exporters, though, because with tariffs being put on, like, in our exports and a stronger Canadian dollar, it actually makes it harder for Americans to buy our goods. Some people would argue, economists here in Canada would argue that the Canadian dollar is artificially suppressed to benefit our exporters. Not great for our consumers, but definitely.
Yeah, and it explains why it costs so much to buy strawberries and things like that when you have to get them from the US.
But many people have said that the Canadian dollar has been artificially suppressed. We have to look all the way back to Stephen Harper to have a Canadian dollar over par, actually $1.10, if I remember correctly, during the Harper. Wouldn't that be nice, eh?
Can you imagine that? Go down to America and slap your Canadian dollars on the counter. That would be nice.
When it is par or better, they just won't give you that exchange there. Yeah, no, doesn't work like that. But anyway, you have to exchange it at the bank. We got some AI tech stuff. This one's really interesting. And I think this one is really interesting for a lot of people that watch CBC. This is an interesting clip here. This is on a very, very popular podcast.
But now every single one of the world's problems has turned into a mimetic virus, which is going into the battlefield of the news and is trying to infect your mind in real time.
Hyperspeed.
So that you become obsessed with the war in Ukraine, which is really far away, or you get obsessed with climate change, or you get obsessed with AI doom, or you get obsessed with whatever. And there's nothing as riveting as the old religion, the world is ending, the world is ending, pay attention, the world is ending. And if you
It's
don't...
a Cassandra complex at global scale.
Cassandra complex at global scale. And I would argue that large percentages of the population are essentially just infected with these mimetic viruses that have taken over their brain and are causing them to do incredible gyration about things that probably aren't even true or are greatly exaggerated.
Sound familiar?
A little bit, but I think some of them aren't exaggerated. Like the fertility rate crisis in the West. I really don't think that that's exaggerated, because we're already seeing the effects in places like Korea, and it's pretty damn scary. But certainly when it comes to things like, you know, the Greta Thunbergs of the world, yeah, I mean that's obviously true, isn't it?
Well, I think even right now, like with the Liberals using Trump as the, you know, the worst thing that's ever happened to Canada. Yeah, there you go. Elon Musk in the news yesterday a lot because he's actually said that he's going to back away from Doge. A lot of the investors and a lot of the analysts really, that's what they were waiting for in that investment call, because not a great quarter for Tesla, and expected in many ways because they did retool all 4 factories to put out the new Model Y. So there's expected drop there, but I think a lot of people think that Elon has been distracted away from his main mission, and Tesla, you know, has so many game-changing things that it can do, and then, you know, he's been distracted with Doge and taking a lot of heat. He's actually been the I guess the straw man or whatever, the guy out front, and even taken some heat away from Donald Trump, because he's been the
scapegoat.
The scapegoat, yeah, he's been the scapegoat. I think Trump has willingly put him out there in the front and said, yeah, if you want to hate somebody, here's the guy. And he's taken on a lot of hate. But he's
got a hell of a lot of personality, hasn't he, as well? So he kind of attracts it himself because he's good at getting attention.
But he sounded,
it's backfired a bit.
I listened to that call, and it's the first time I've heard Elon Musk sound very, very tired. You know what I mean? Like almost defeated a little bit, because I think it's worn him down. I think because he cares a lot about his team as well, and I think, you know, like a lot of them have been complaining that they're under attack. You know, like dealerships are, and I think it's worn really heavily on him, and I think he's in a better place just to focus on Tesla and SpaceX and Starlink and all those things that are actually adding value to the world, as opposed to, like, I think he's started them off, so they can go ahead and finish, you know, these cuts in things. He doesn't need to be the guy in there anymore. He's given them the tools and the AI and all that stuff that they need. So let them do their thing, and you go do your thing.
Yeah, I would say for a car brand, is there actually a worse is there a worse thing that could happen to your car brand than for it to become the object of potential violence by like random people in the street who want to key your car, smash it up, or set fire to it, throw rocks at it? I mean, I have to say, that's got to be one of the like most effective ways to kill a car brand, hasn't it? Or any brand. It's like, if you wear this Adidas shirt, like, people are going to punch you. Well, okay, I'm not going to buy any more Adidas shirts then. You know, it's kind of like, it's such an effective, even though it's like brutal and primitive, it's so effective. And I can't help but think some of the drop in sales will be to do with that as well. A lot of people might have actually wanted one, but they just thought, you know, I've got kids or something. There's no way I'm going to risk some lunatic throwing a rock at this car because they don't like Elon Musk.
Anyway, in that Q1 call, there's so much going on with Tesla, and I think that it's so important for him to focus on what's going on there. So they did change over, like I said, all 4 factories simultaneously. That's an industry first to do that, which is, you know, like some would argue that's a bad idea, a good idea. But now all the Model 3s and Ys and Cybertrucks drive themselves off to production lines and go park in the parking lots, and that's happening in Fremont and Giga Texas right now. That they drive themselves off the production line. I mean, think of the savings there, right? It's just crazy. And then they've got record battery production going on. I'm just trying to go through some of these highlights here.
Well, the cyber taxi, or what's it actually called? Is it cyber taxi?
Cybercab.
Cybercab. If the cybercab thing, I mean, I would encourage people to watch the promotion, the show thing where he like advertised it for the first time. But if that comes off, if that's for real, then I wouldn't worry one bit about Tesla, to be honest. Because if that becomes commonplace, that you can have your own taxi basically, and you can just sit in the back while it drives you places.
Yeah, he
then,
talked about.
You know, they're gonna sell like hotcakes, aren't they?
He talked about that relentlessly yesterday, and he said that robotaxi is on track for June in Austin, Texas, to launch first in June there, and that is the goal. And think of all the time you get back when you're driving to work. I mean, I use full self-drive every day, but I still have to watch the road because the car will remind me if I start drifting off and doing different things. But he said, like, just, you know, think if you can just, you know, text while you drive, or, you know, communicate, or even have an app. Think of all the things you could do.
Watch a movie, even.
How much more productive you can be if your car is driving yourself. Plus, I find it a lot safer for myself.
Yeah, and I would feel safer if I knew that other people were doing that as well.
It pays attention all the time, whereas, you know, like, as we age here, sometimes you look up and you say, oh, that was red. Whoops. Whoopsie.
Well, you know, as somebody that I often drive with kids in the back. I'm often driving with a shouty child in the back, my son, and it's like, that is really distracting. It's kind of unsafe, actually.
So there you go. And then we're into our meme section. And again, take these memes with a grain of salt. Some of them are. We're just sharing this to lighten your day, and that's what we're trying to do, lighten your day. So when you watch NowMedia, you can learn something, hopefully, plus also feel better and lighten your day as well.
We're being accused of selling Teslas there by a commenter.
I wish I could sell Teslas. I wish I could, because I think they're such great cars. But anyway, Joe, I can. They won't put me on payroll. So there you go. But yeah, you have to drive one to experience it. But you're gonna like this, Joe. Here, we're gonna play this clip for you.
I can't sit next to this thing.
No worries. I'm going to go speak to the captain.
Please speak to the captain. Please.
I'll be right back.
Oh.
I'm sorry.
Oh my God, he's assaulted me. I knew it. Oh, you maggots. You just hit me. Oh! Please call the medic. I need a medic right away.
I didn't do it. I just recorded that. I didn't do it.
I need a medic right now.
Dude, she's crazy.
He assaulted me.
Calm down, okay? We have a solution.
Yes.
I did speak to the captain, and he does agree that nobody should be
Oh,
in this
thank
condition
you.
for
Oh,
so
thank you
we
so
do have
much.
a seat available in first class.
Thank you
So
so
if you want to
much.
come with me, I'm going to escort you to first class, okay?
No,
Ma'am, you are welcome to sit in
No,
your seat.
you're doing the wrong
Please
thing
buckle
right
your
now. You're doing the wrong thing. You know what?
This
You don't know who I am.
is-
You don't know who I am, but you are going to get the worst reviews, and I feel like you're going to be grounded for a long time. This is your fault.
I understand.
I don't even think you talked to the captain. Get this maggot out of my way. Get out of
Surely that's not real. That can't possibly be real.
I have no idea. Anyway, it's in our meme section. There you go.
I mean, Elizabeth May would never do that, would she? She would never agree to perform like she did there.
She did say yesterday that Canadians should pay way more taxes to make up for all. This is what she said. This is actually that Canadians should pay way more taxes to make up for what the U.S. government is not paying out to other countries.
Yeah, I did see that. Kind of nuts when you think how large the American wallet is. I don't think we can step in there.
But again, that's what Elizabeth May. She's was an elected MP, and says that Canada needs to pay more in taxes so that we can make up for what the U.S. is not doing.
Yeah, don't think it's really possible, frankly. But I mean, if we did try, it would probably bankrupt the federal government.
Here's another clip, a video clip that I thought was entertaining. When you do bad things, expect bad things. Here you go. mess with the ostrich. Hey?
Definitely not.
Like, why do you go
Not
out
really
of your
though.
way?
Those birds, like cassowaries as well. Like, just leave them alone.
Why do you go
They'll
out?
do you in.
So all those people that in that Canada report, they were talking about. Remember, this is our comedy section. That Canada report there, where Canada's going to go out there and start foraging, and I don't know if the moose are going to like that. The mooses, right? How many mooses
No.
is it? Is the plural of mooses or mice? Like mooses, mices?
I always was under the assumption that it was mooses.
It's just moose, I think. But anyway.
And moose. I've heard it. Yeah, I've heard it said that way. But I think maybe both are acceptable. That's going to be my theory.
It's like geeses and gander. Geeses. You know what?
Geese.
Don't mess with a Canada goose either. Like that. It's like a small ostrich. It'll come at you and hard.
I've made that mistake before. I was in Florida, and there were signs everywhere that said, like, watch out for the alligators. Pretty sort of, you know how the Americans do these signs, threatening you with death. And I was like walking around looking for alligators, and in the end, I got chased by a Canada goose, which was frightening. It like really charged and ran after me for about sort of 30 feet or something.
I grew up on a farm, so if you're gonna get chased by a rooster or a goose or a swan for that matter, you got to plant yourself and get ready to kick, right? Because like you just run, you're just prey, like that lady there with the ostrich there. You're just prey. There you go. And then
vicious animals.
Here's a meme. I guess one of the CBC reporters posted this thing and a comment about Mark Carney there, and then pulled it down after probably got told that she can't do that. Liberal leader Mark Carney said he was tired when visiting a canteen in Granby, Quebec. Inside, Carney put on a cap, said it was like Trump's photo op at McDonald's. I thought Trump was the mortal enemy, and now he's trying to pull off some of his stuff. I was waiting for somebody to do the old McDonald's thing because that was a big deal for Trump when he went to work at McDonald's and put some shade on Kamala Harris there because Kamala said she worked at McDonald's. Turns out she didn't, and he said that he ended up working more for McDonald's and like Trump would like McDonald's because there's a fountain of Coca-Cola there. The guy doesn't drink or smoke. He doesn't drink or smoke. Never has, according to him. But he does indulge in Coca-Cola.
Yeah, he likes McDonald's as well, doesn't he? You can't forget that time he had loads of people around at the White House and he just had piles and piles of burgers, filet o fish, and Big Macs.
I guess that's the regular thing on his Air Force One or Trump One or whatever they call it. They even had that picture. Remember when he first won and they had RFK on there, and then they were all chowing down on Mickey D, and even they made RFK chew one down.
Yeah, he looked pretty unhappy though, didn't he?
And here's one for you. This man got married young and never got to experience getting drunk at bars and waking up hungover with a new STD every morning. So that's tragic.
They're increasingly kind of going for the good Christian life, aren't they, Babylon Bee? They're trying to, it's an interesting development, but their satire now has become increasingly, trying to push the good life.
And then this one is the best one ever because everybody likes to go after RFK. Bobby, poor Bobby. Bobby gets beat up quite a bit, but the Americans, Elizabeth May, there she is, Elizabeth Warren, and AOC might be the next Democratic candidate for the presidency, chugging down food dyes to protest RFK's banning of food dyes.
Something that they would do. It's not too far-fetched, that, is it?
No, I mean, just saying, what's wrong with a good food dye? I actually did a live stream with somebody that said that he was actually picking on one of the conservative candidates and saying, that person doesn't even want people eating cereal. I said to him, I don't eat cereal. It's just sugar. It's basically sugar. And he said, it's our right to eat sugar. I'm just eat cereal. Okay, so eat it then, right?
RFK, he wouldn't like that, would he?
And wash it down with a couple of jugs of food dye. Who doesn't like that, right?
And seed oils, that's the other one that they all hate, isn't it? RFK hates that.
Oh, well, there's a lot of people talking about seed oils and stuff like that. So I think in McDonald's, there's 6 ingredients in French fries. You would think there's only 1 or 2, like salt and salt in the potato. But no, there's 6 ingredients, including sugar that's mixed with the salt.
Yeah, well, they do that to the buns as well, don't they?
Well, I think Subway, in England, they have to classify the Subway bun as a dessert because it has.
It's definitely, yeah, it's it's either Subway or McDonald's. Yeah, they do that.
There you go. That's our show for today. We do have Mario Canseco at noon. We're going to talk about polls, so if you want to tune in for that, that'd be great. And then Ian and I were back again at 1 o'clock with Renee. We're going to break down the budgets. So that should be interesting. We're going to try and do that, in a fairly short time. And then tomorrow I have Harpreet in here from the NDP talking about the Liberal candidate, and then hopefully get up the one on Dan Elvis was in yesterday, the Conservative candidate for the other side of the lake and parts of Kelowna. Like that riding's been cut up in a little bit different way. But there you go. That's our show for today. We'll see you tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And we're going to be live streaming on election night from, I think we're going to start around 7, maybe 6 or 7. And we'll be here till there's a new government in Canada. There you go.
Or the same one with a new guy in charge.
It'll be new no matter what. It'll be somebody. It'll be new no matter what. But, the key thing is if you want to make change, get out there and vote, and then make sure your friends and neighbors, this is your time. This is your time. The last day to vote be April 28th. With that said, we do thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.